Hello, everyone, and welcome to our space today on World ID 2.0. Earlier today, we announced World ID 2.0, and we're going to use this space to talk through the key advancements included in this release. They include a variety of exciting things, existing pre-built integrations, production-grade ID primitives, increased fraud protections. And we're joined with some really impressive guests. So we have Tiago Sada, head of product at Tools for Humanity, and Philipp Sippl from the Worldcoin Foundation, who were both instrumental in World ID 2.0. I'm Stephen Smith, the head of protocol at Tools for Humanity, and I'll be hosting today. So we announced World ID 1.0 in early 2023. And today, just a little bit earlier today, we announced World ID 2.0, which is a major upgrade to the protocol. To get us kicked off, because probably not everyone has seen the announcement in detail, been able to read it, Tiago, why don't you lead us off with kind of a summary of what we announced today?
For sure. First of all, super excited that this day is finally here. A bunch of teams across the Worldcoin ecosystem have been working on all of these new functionalities and upgrades for a long time. Some of these were planned already in the original Worldcoin white paper. Others have just been response to feedback that we've gotten from the community, from developers, from users around the world. And so just quite excited that this day is finally here. Now, specifically, there's three things that come with World ID 2.0. The first one is something that we're calling World ID apps, which is just a fancy way of saying it's now a lot easier to integrate World ID with third-party apps and services. And so now any developer that wants can just make it so that you can verify your accounts on their app using your World ID. Now, something really cool that we've been able to do is that it's so easy to do this that we actually just went ahead and built some World ID apps for platforms like Discord, Reddit, Minecraft, Telegram, and a couple of others. And so you can already start using these on some of your favorite apps and platforms. As part of this upgrade, we also completely overhauled the developer platform. And so it's much faster, it's much more reliable. It obviously supports all of the new functionalities of World ID 2.0, which ties in quite nicely with the new grants program that the foundation announced last week. And builders that develop World ID apps will be able to apply for some of those grants. So that's the first thing that comes with World ID 2.0. The second thing is something called levels. And the easiest way to think about levels is to think about how IDs work in the real world. When you go to a library in your university, you'll just briefly show your ID, your student ID, and the librarian will glance at it and they'll let you in, right? But when you go to a bar or a nightclub, the bouncer will actually take a more detailed look at the ID. They'll make sure that your face matches the one in your ID. They might even flash it with some UV light. And when you go to the airport, it's even higher, right? They'll check your fingerprints, they'll check the NFC. And so the lesson there is just different circumstances in day-to-day life require different types of verifications. And so World ID now works the same way, right? There's still the standard World ID orb signal, but now there's also a more high security one and a more casual one. And so on the high security side of things, we're introducing something called World ID Orb Plus. And that's your classic World ID that has been verified by an orb. But then on top of that, when you're going to use it, you'll perform a face authentication from the app. What that means is it's just basically like Face ID when you want to use your World ID. And that allows you to make sure that only you get to use your World ID for certain important actions. And now for apps that just don't have super high security needs and they want a lighter level of verification, we're also adding something called World ID Device, which, while certainly not as secure as the orb side of things, it does give you some level of protection by ensuring that the ID that the person is using is at least being used on a unique device. And so now there's these three levels: World ID Device, World ID Orb, and World ID Orb Plus, and developers can just choose the one that is the right for their apps. Now, super important to highlight that, as always, no personal data is shared with any developers, or in general in the protocol. Developers get just a disposable app-specific identifier so that you can log in and log out from those apps, but they cannot track what you do or see across any other apps. And then lastly, there's a set of 6 core upgrades to the protocol that, while they might be less sexy, they're super important. And these are upgrades that make the protocol even more private, give users even more control over how to use their ID, and make the protocol even more open. So we can get into the full list later, but that is just a summary of everything that's going on with World ID. The new World ID apps, the new World ID levels, and the new core upgrades to the protocol.
All right. Well, thank you. It's like super exciting. So you went through the different integrations that we have pretty quickly. And could you go over those one more time? Like, what are the pre-built integrations that we announced today?
Yeah, for sure. So already starting today, there's a bunch of things you can do with your World ID, and it's going to be tricky to cover all of them. And so actually one of the things that we've done is there's a new WorldCoin app store, both on the website and on World app, where you can actually just explore all of the different apps and services that you can use in the WorldCoin ecosystem. But I'll highlight a few of the most exciting integrations that we're launching today. The first one I would say is Reddit. We're launching a tool so that moderators on Reddit can require or can assign you special roles on subreddits if you have been verified with a World ID, right? And so subreddits that, for example, struggle with a lot of fraud or with things like that can now require that, for example, if you want to post more often than once a day, you need to verify your account with some degree of World ID, right? Or the exact rules they can figure out. So that's one that we're pretty excited about. A similar one now in the gaming space is a Minecraft plugin. And so I grew up playing Minecraft. I spent basically all my middle school there. And already back then, it was super common on servers that people would come in and they would start destroying the worlds and they would start trolling people and you would ban them and they would come back in with another account and so on and so forth. And so with the new plugin for Minecraft, servers can now decide, again, to apply specific rules for people that have or have not been verified with some level of World ID. The last one I would highlight for now is the Shopify integration, which is a bit different because while it also is useful for fraud prevention, and so for example, businesses or Shopify stores that struggle with a lot of chargeback can now use this to help hinder that. There's also a quite exciting side of things, which is they can use that to give real verified people exclusive discounts, right? And so an example of this might be you launch a new store where you're selling Christmas sweaters and you want to get new customers. And so you say, okay, I'll give people 30% off on their first order, right? But you want to make sure that each person only gets that discount one time and they don't just keep getting 30% on every single one of their orders. And so now with World ID, any Shopify store can actually do something like this, again, keeping complete privacy. And so these three integrations, as well as the new Telegram one, the new Discord one, and a couple of others are already live on the WorldCoin App Store. And so people can start trying them today. And then hopefully over the next weeks and months, developers will be even more creative than us. And so they'll build a bunch of really cool apps to use with your World ID.
Cool. Very good. And we'll talk about the App Store in a little bit more detail a little bit later on, including like how folks can go browse the App Store and look around in there. The space today is about World ID 2.0, but you mentioned the grants program the foundation recently launched. And we, as I mentioned at the outset, we have Philipp on the space from the Worldcoin Foundation. And I think the response to that grant program has been pretty phenomenal so far. Philipp, do you have any, like latest stats on how many applications and things of that nature we might have seen?
I actually don't have the latest stats on it, but like the application is still on. Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate, like it's up to 25K WorldCoin for the normal RFP track. We're also looking for long-term contributors, collaborators, and it's like what we refer to as the open track. But in general, we see it as like a way to advance the tech tree, as we also framed it on the post. So they're very specific problems that we think would improve certain things. And they're pretty well laid out, I think, on the RFP page. So worldcoin.org/RFP or on the white paper. And yeah, it would be amazing to see people tackle those problems and apply, and also obviously for any other problem that people think they could solve or like want to improve on.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I mean, the whole goal is to involve more and more developers in the project at all levels. And certainly around World ID, there's been a good bit of work on World ID to make it easy to be used by developers. And so, Tiago, that kind of leads into maybe the next question. And maybe we should take a little bit of a step back. When you talk about World ID, we sometimes refer to it collectively, but there's typically multiple components with World ID. You want to just give us like a brief summary of what we might consider the different components of World ID?
For sure, yeah. So there's, first of all, the World ID itself is like this digital passport. We like to call it a human passport for the internet. So it's like a digital passport that lives on your mobile phone, right? You can generate that. It's a random number for privacy that you just download the app and you can generate a World ID. Now, that passport is what you will use then to go and prove to different apps that you're a real human. So the way that works is, for example, when you visit an orb, the orb will actually stamp that passport as verified. And without having to tie it to your biometrics, you can then go around and show like, hey, look, I have a World ID that has a stamp, has been stamped by an orb. And so that's what you will have on your phone. Now, there's two other components. Number one, there is a World ID developer platform. And that is just a set of tools that developers and builders around the world can use for building World ID apps, right? So to build integrations so that you can use the World ID on their apps. And so that developer platform includes an SDK. It includes a developer portal with a bunch of tools that make it developing easier, like a simulator of the World ID app. And it also includes all of the documentation and guides and examples that the different teams have prepared. And now all of that, both the World ID that users have on their phone and the developer platform that builders can use to build apps are built on top of the World ID protocol. So the World ID protocol is actually this open system that runs on the Ethereum, on the Ethereum blockchain, that is actually keeping track of which World IDs exist, which don't, and which ones are verified in which manner.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And again, plenty of opportunity at all those levels for people to get involved. If you happen to be a developer, you're interested in contributing any and all of those different components of World ID, would be perfect to get engaged on. Okay, so let's shift. We'll get a little bit more technical now, and we'll talk about some of the core tenets of World ID, and specifically World ID 2.0. So World ID, if we back up, was designed with the beliefs that privacy is a fundamental human right, that individuals should own their identity, and that a system like this should be a public good. Like it's potentially too valuable and too large to not be a public good. It needs to benefit everyone, everywhere, regardless of background or economic status. So Philipp, you worked obviously along with a lot of the team members on the protocol side of World ID 2.0, and it kind of doubles down. And there's like six core upgrades to World ID 2.0. We outlined those, of course, in the blog post, but they're so powerful. I think it's worth hitting on here. So do you want to walk through some of those and just give us like a summary of what those different upgrades do for a user of World ID?
Yeah, totally. I think, let me start with, I think one of the major, the major upgrade for World ID 2.0, which is that the most secure of all of the proof of personhood things out there, we believe, is the orb, right? Because it's based on biometrics, it's based on secure hardware. There's a lot of effort put into security, and obviously the privacy side that is then guaranteed through the zero knowledge proofs and decoupling the actual verification and an orb and the usage, as it was explained further already. But there's one important improvement we now made to it, which is that it's for some cases not only enough to have verified once, but you may want to verify a second time or a third time, or get like a current authentication. And the most useful way to do that is through the face, actually, on the phone. So there's no need to go back to an orb. You actually can do this within any World ID client. So for example, World ID app will allow you to verify through your face again at the time of usage, or at some periodic interval. And for example, an app which may not require very high or that high guarantees that it was taken 2 seconds ago, I can just ask if it was done maybe a week ago. And this actually allows you to have much further security guarantees on kind of the recency and that the World ID is still in the user's hands it should belong to. And I think this is one of the most powerful upgrades, which actually is a huge security upgrade. And the important thing, it doesn't compromise anything on the privacy. So all of this face comparison that I just mentioned happens locally on the phone. So actually none of the face data is leaving ever the phone. It's completely on the user's device, and there's no interaction at all with any outside component. And the proof just carries an additional signature that this was performed on the phone. So no compromise on privacy, just better security in the end for the user. And yeah, on the second larger category is then, as also Tiago, I think, already mentioned, like different levels. And maybe just before I dive too much deeper in the details, and maybe Tiago can say more about that. Now I just talked about a very high secure level, like the orb, and then orb plus face, so orb plus. There should be, for some applications, some lower security threshold, which we now allow with a device-based level. So this is just through the fact that you own a valid device, a unique device, it gives you a sort of Sippl protection already. And yeah, you could have multiple phones, but it's already some sort of rate limit on it. And obviously it's not as good as the orb, or by far not as good as the orb, but it does help for some applications. So we're also exposing this now through the SDK. And maybe Tiago, you can add more details if you want.
Yeah, the levels definitely interesting. I wanted to get your Philip, your feedback on a couple of other, to me, some of the super exciting parts of this. And granted, I come at things more from maybe the protocol side as well, and I see enhancements at the protocol level here. Obviously, there's the levels and the usage of the levels in the App Store now, which we're actually going to dig into a little bit deeper in a second. But for example, like some of these core upgrades, like resetting your World ID. So like if you ever, let's say you didn't back up your account on iCloud or Google Cloud, or you did back it up and you totally forgot the password, the ability to reset your World ID, coming back to an orb, for example, that's like super exciting to me. If I understand it correctly, it kind of expires your old one and then allows you to get a new one. I think it's, Philip, where you were headed when you were talking about you could verify again and again. So just kind of a core fundamental primitive, I think that's, super interesting. And there'll be a lot of, it's kind of a great, it's kind of protection, if you will. In addition to being a very strong UX upgrade, there's a lot of protection around that too in the protocol for someone in their World ID. And then a couple of others, again, I refer to the blog post we just put out. They go into more detail. I would say, how about, Philip, any update on like personal custody? And we'll talk about rollout of World ID 2.0. Like some things are available today, some things are coming early 2024. But anything you want to give us just an overview of what we're calling personal custody as one of the core upgrades?
Yeah, that's also somewhat related to what I mentioned before with face authentication, right? As none of the data leaves actually the user's device. For that, you actually also need to take custody of, for example, the face representation and like as the image, or then a lower level representation, as it's called, the embedding. So the prerequisite actually to do this kind of face authentication is also to have custody of this data locally. And this not only allows face authentication, but also future upgrades of the system where you can, again, either locally calculate a new version of this face embedding or a new version of the iris code, and therefore upgrade the version that is currently part of the uniqueness service within the global set of iris codes. So it's taking the approach of getting full control of the user for the data.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, good. I guess we'll move on to like apps and integrations a little bit. So we talked about the App Store. And first of all, the App Store is located at worldcoin.org/apps, APPS. So it is an incredible site. It's incredible to have an App Store associated with the project. I think that's just an example of how much the project has grown. And we just launched mid-year of 2023 and how much the project's gone, the different integrations that we have out there. And we're just looking forward to so much more being built. So you have an App Store. How do you get in the App Store? Like how would someone, obviously they have to build an app, and what's the process of getting an app included in the App Store?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like you said, the first step, and really the only more difficult step, is just building the app in the first place. And even at that, it's not difficult at all. So you would just go to developer.worldcoin.org. You can create a developer account for the developer platform. Again, this is a completely optional platform. You can actually, if you want to go on like hardcore mode, you can just build directly on top of the protocol that runs on Ethereum, and you can integrate that with on-chain apps. But the developer platform just makes it a lot easier to build not just on-chain apps, but also web and mobile apps that leverage World ID. And so on that developer platform, you can actually now create a team. That's a new feature that is also launching at WLD 2.0. So you can now have team accounts. And inside that team, you can create apps, right? And so it's very similar to what you would do, for example, if you're creating apps for the iPhone App Store. So you'll create an app, you'll set it up, you'll hook that up with your integration or with the specific application that you're going to connect. And once that is ready, you can actually then, there's a form inside of the developer portal, and then as well on the Worldcoin App Store, where you can submit that app for review to be listed on the Worldcoin App Store. Now, for you to start using that app and to release it to your users, you actually don't need to get approved or anything like that. The submission is an optional thing just to get listed on the Worldcoin App Store. So there might be apps that developers build that they don't want to list on the store because they just want to keep for their friends or for a specific community, and that's totally fine. They don't have to submit that for review. And so once they do that, the team will look at your app, the team will play with it, and once they get the assets, they'll be able to list this on the store. And so people will be able to see that both on the website and on World App at least.
All right, excellent. We have a question from the audience. It's like super relevant to actually what we're discussing now. And the question was, and I'll direct it to Tiago, how does the Telegram integration work? How does it prevent spam or bots?
Yeah, it's a great question. You can actually go already on worldcoin.org/apps and click on the Telegram integration to get all the details. But the most basic way to use it is it's a bot that you install on a Telegram chat. And so what it does is, one of the things you can do is when you join a Telegram chat, it can tell you like, hey, to be a member of this Telegram chat, you need to verify your account with a World ID. So you'll press a button on that message that you'll see on the screen. And then that will either, if you're doing that on desktop, it'll show you a QR code that you can then scan with World App on your mobile phone. Or if you're on mobile, you can simply just tap that button and you'll get redirected to the World App. And then on World App, it'll ask you like, hey, Telegram is trying to verify your account using your World ID. And so if you say yes, you will then return to the Telegram chat. And then on that Telegram chat specifically, you are now going to be verified, right? And so your verification is individual across Telegram chats. And so even if a given chat or if your group chat says, hey, only one person can join, each person can only join this chat once or with one account, you can actually choose to use different Telegram chats or Telegram accounts for different chats, right? And so maybe you have a crypto anon Telegram that you want to join your crypto group chats with. And so you can use your World ID for that. And then there's also like personal group chats that you want to join and you want to do that with your personal account. You can also do that with your World ID. And so those different group chats will not have visibility and will not be able to know that you are the same person because of all of the privacy protections of World ID.
Excellent. Yeah, and just a reminder, worldcoin.org/apps lists everything there. You see an integration that you might be interested in, you click on it, you get obviously an overview of kind of what it's intended to do. You get a section in most cases on how it works, mechanically how it works, and then a very specific section on how to connect that particular integration. And then typically like a link out to the source code, which is super interesting for developers because you can then go, I mean, there's nothing better to start with than a working example or a working sample to get cloned and create your own integration, perhaps on something else. So anyway, yeah. Okay. So thanks for that overview. I want to ask the same question myself on an integration I'm super excited about, and that's the Shopify integration. So could you tell us a little bit of detail on the Shopify integration, why it was developed and how it works as well, just like an overview?
For sure, yeah. To be honest, the Shopify integration comes from a place of, I think it's easy to think about World ID as just something that prevents bad things. And while that's certainly the case, like preventing misinformation or preventing bots, it also enables people to do a lot of things that they couldn't do before, right? And so I think Shopify is a perfect example of that, where, as we were talking about at the beginning of the space, yes, it can help you prevent chargeback fraud, right? And you can start applying some restrictions on which users can buy and cannot, especially if you're the type of business that's dealing with a lot of fraud. The thing that's more exciting to me about this integration is that it enables like win-win dynamics, right? I think like Groupon, for example, was a very popular app in the 2010s. It's still around. It's a bit less popular, but it's just basically this idea of, hey, restaurants just sometimes want to give you coupons or discounts to do certain things. Why? Because it's on their best interest, right? It's coupons and promotions are a tool for small businesses and retail businesses and all types of businesses to grow. But at the same time, they allow consumers to get better deals, right? Especially for things that they're interested in. So it's a really cool win-win dynamic. Now, the challenge that platforms like Groupon have had in the past is that it's really easy to abuse those. And so people will claim the same thing multiple times, or they will buy a bunch of items with a discount and then they will resell the items. And so they're taking advantage of this goodwill that the entrepreneurs or different stores have. And so what the Shopify integration allows merchants to do is exactly this. They can offer more aggressive promotions, more aggressive discounts for real people, because they know that it will be either very difficult or just flat out impossible, depending on which level of World ID they're using, to cheat those. And so this is a win, obviously, for the businesses because they're able to grow faster, but it's also a win for consumers because they get access to better deals from merchants.
And it's the Web3 private anonymous equivalent of some benefit you might get with some account that you have at maybe a sporting goods chain, where you get rewards, or because you've been a certain level of customer throughout the year, you get a little bonus discount around the holidays or something for gifts. So it's that same equivalent concept. So like you said, it's not just to protect against, let's call it nefarious activity or something, but also a way to reward your community in a way that you're assured is not being gamed in some fashion. So super, super cool. And super happy to see this. Before we move on to kind of talk about what's next and the rollout a little bit, if a developer wanted to integrate World ID 2.0 in their product, what's the best place to start? Some of the resources they could go to, or how would they get started?
Yeah, so the first thing I would do is actually just download World app and get a World ID, right? So if you don't have one already, so that you can play around with this and you can understand what this feels and what the experience is like for users. The second thing I would do is still not build the app. I would just go and browse the Worldcoin App Store. I think that once you have that World ID, and then you can go and poke around and use it in a bunch of different places and look at a lot of different apps, that will give you ideas, not just for what you can build with it, but how to go about that, to understand what is the best experience, what has worked for some apps, what doesn't work for other apps. And the cool thing is on the Worldcoin App Store, you're able to see apps across a bunch of different types of industries. So you can see apps for commerce, you can see apps that are on-chain Web3 apps, you can see apps that are social media apps, you can see a bunch of different types of apps. And so once you know specifically what you want to build, then just going to either the docs on docs.worldcoin.org or directly to the developer portal on developer.worldcoin.org. Those are good places for you to actually get started building out that integration. Honestly, it's super easy, especially if you're just going to use the standard JavaScript widget that the SDK comes with. It's just a couple of lines of codes and you can hook it up. So it's super simple for web and mobile and on-chain apps to integrate this. You can test your integration using the tools on the developer portal. So there's a super useful simulator where instead of having to use your phone with your actual real World ID, you can actually use a staging test version of a World ID app that's virtual on your browser. And so that just allows you to iterate to work through all the different edge cases that you might need to adjust. And then once you're ready to publish that, you can just immediately release that to your users. And then if you want to get it listed on the Worldcoin App Store, you just submit a super short form on the developer portal and the app can get listed there pretty quickly.
Okay. And I'll actually take another audience question right now because it's very much related to what you were talking about. And the question was, are there any simulator/staging improvements planned? And that was also kind of part of the announcement today. You mentioned it briefly when we kicked this off, Tiago, about the upgrade to the developer platform. Any additional color you want to add to that?
Yeah, so the developer platform is super popular, but in particular, the simulator is something that hackathon after hackathon, people just tell us how much they love. And so definitely the simulator is seeing a bunch of upgrades, first and foremost, to support everything new that we're talking about with World ID 2.0, but also just reliability and experience updates. In general, the entire developer platform is significantly more performant. So the entire ID Kit SDK, which is the JavaScript SDK, has been completely rewritten from scratch. We're actually now using a new open source bridge called the Wallet Bridge for the communication between wallets and apps And so this new bridge is end-to-end encrypted. It's fully open source. Developers can run their own instance of it for their apps, or they can just use the one provided by TFH. And so the other thing that has happened that is hopefully developers and definitely users will appreciate quite a bit is that generating the on-device zero knowledge proofs for World ID is now up to 24 times faster. And so on 64-bit devices, generating zero knowledge proofs is about 30 to 40% faster than it was with World ID 1.0. And doing so on 32-bit devices, which there's actually still quite a bit around the world, which is a surprising thing for many people, it's over 24 times faster. And so when you're going through that flow on World App and it's asking you like, hey, this app wants to verify with you, and you say yes, and then on device, we generate that zero knowledge proof that will get submitted to developers, that process is now going to take at most a couple of seconds, where in the past on some older phones, it could take up to a minute or even more.
Excellent. And huge shout out on the optimizations and performance improvements to Philipp and the folks working with him on this piece of the protocol. It's just a phenomenal improvement. Another note on the whole developer portal, that website is docs.worldcoin.org. The first thing on that page is a migration guide for World ID 2.0. So it will kind of walk you through everything there. So would encourage you, again, if you have any interest in building or continuing to build, to check that out. It's been updated, of course. Yes, again, we'll shift now as we're getting close to time. We'll talk about a little bit what's coming next, and then we'll see what questions we might have from the audience that we haven't already answered. Go ahead and get those in if you did have any. But when we announced World ID 2.0 today, we mentioned that the upgrade begins today and continues gradually through early 2024. Let's just talk about a little bit about what are the plans for the rollout, like what's available today, and then what will be coming in the months ahead.
For sure. World ID 2.0 it's a huge and monumental upgrade. And so there's a lot of these changes that actually either still require more work, or more importantly, they require input from the community, and we need to give developers time to prepare for these changes. And so we've actually split this into a couple of waves. The first wave of upgrades, as you mentioned, is going live today. And so today, the new Worldcoin, most of the things on the developer platform are going live. More importantly, the new World ID app standard is going live, including with the new App Store and all of these new integrations that we talked about that we were able to build. So the app that we built for Reddit, the app that we built for Shopify, for Discord, for Telegram, and for a couple of other services are all, or at least most of them, are going live today. Also live today is the World ID device level, so the more casual verification level that we talked about, and a few of the protocol upgrades. Now, over the coming weeks and months into the first quarter of next year, the rest of the features will roll out, right? And so that includes World ID or Plus. And so that is this verification level that Philipp was talking about, where when you're going to use your World ID on your phone, we actually perform an additional face check. That's like this selfie kind of like Face ID, where you're showing that you're still in fact the same person, that you're the owner of this ID if you want to use it. And also some of these other upgrades such as personal custody are rolling out over the coming weeks. And so both the foundation and TFH will be sharing updates throughout the process as they update both World App and the actual protocols. But the discussion for all of these will continue on Discord.
Okay, excellent. And I guess just before we get, I do have a question for you both. It's a little more open-ended, like looking into the future kind of question. But just in terms of like support. So if like a developer needed support with anything related to World ID or the new capabilities, where's the best place for a developer to find that support?
I can take that as well. First and foremost, the Discord, right? That's the most obvious place. Certainly people can just reach out either to the team at TFH or the team at the foundation, and either one of them will be happy to point them to the right resource. Just honestly, tagging Worldcoin on Twitter will probably also do it as well. And I guess that's what I would say about that. Is quite simple.
Yeah, also, the repos are open source. So if there's anything, file an issue, file an PR if you want to improve any tooling. So I think also GitHub is just fork it if you're not happy with it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, so a lot of the protocol repos are all open source. A lot of the integrations we talked about today are open source. The docs website, docs.worldcoin.org, that's a great resource. If you scroll to the bottom of the docs homepage, if you will, there's the link. If you're wondering, well, what is this Discord you're talking about? There's a link to the Discord at the bottom of that page. Just click on it, you get an invite, and you go straight in. and you can just start interacting and asking questions there. So here's the open-ended question I'll ask you both, and then we'll start answering some audience questions. As we look into the future, what types of integrations are you most excited to see? And what kind of impact do you think World ID will have on them? So, and I know that's a big question. Take your time, give it some thought. You may have something already at the top of your head, but yeah, what
start on
type
this one,
of integrations you think we'll see? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the specific thing about World ID, and I also mentioned before, the security part of it. There are many ways of achieving whatever, some form of a capture or something, like some very low, I don't know, rate limiting. But I think where World ID and specifically the orb level comes in is at a high security bar. So anything that comes like something that you should not get more than once. So this definitely applies to UBI, for example. Like I'm very excited about people doing experiments in UBI, and I think it's a perfect experiment for World ID. Yeah, I think that anything that has like high security bars, and I'd love to see some experience around that.
How about you, Tiago?
I think that beyond a lot of the examples that we've talked about, something else that requires this really strong sense of proof of personhood is any type of voting, right? And so I think that more and more, whether it's in crypto, but honestly also this becoming quite relevant outside of crypto, we're going to have to figure out how to build and operate digital democracies in the world. And so just now having this primitive of one person, one vote for the first time on the internet, and in a way that preserves privacy is just something that unlocks many new ways of building digital democracies. And yes, I'm excited about in the short term seeing people build financial applications. I'm sure you can build under collateralized lending and things like that on top of World ID. Same thing with social media, right? I think all of those are the obvious ones. But if we're talking about things that are going to be very meaningful to the world over the next 10 years, I think digital democracies is something that will be uniquely enabled by World ID.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think decentralized governance is something that there have been different experiments with it, but I don't know if I've seen one personally that I think is super effective. But World ID absolutely enables some pretty interesting governance models. Obviously, you could do one person, one vote. That's simple, right? But that in combination with whatever else is important in your project or community, like maybe reputation in that community. So your governance weight is based on the fact you are a unique human, plus how involved you are with that community. Some gauge of that has some bearing on like your votes in the governance process. So I think that's going to be super interesting. And then one of the fundamental use cases of World ID and a Sybil resistant proof of personhood in general is like distribution of scarce resources. So what Philipp said, like UBI experiments and the first rollout of some things like that, I think are going to be pretty incredible. Okay, so we'll shift and pick up a few audience questions. So let me look at the list here. So here's a question. It says, and I'm just reading it. I haven't pre-read it, so hopefully I can understand. So does WorldCoin allow you to circumvent KYC at each interaction since it's all verified? Do we still do a repetitive KYC process at exchanges, et cetera, or does this work like a multi-pass?
So it's solving different problems, right? There's certainly apps that use KYC as a way to prevent fraud or get Sybil resistance. And in that case, yes, developers can certainly use World ID instead of verifying your passport to make sure that they only have one account. Now, the KYC, other times, what it's solving for is compliance, right? Like legal compliance. The developers just have to operate according to certain local laws. And in that case, it definitely doesn't replace it, right? It complements it. And so I would say it really depends on the case, and it's up to each developer how they choose to use World ID for that.
Okay, excellent. Good question. And then this is a question, I believe, from someone that clearly they've done some development with World ID. They're wondering if re-verified users will get the same app-specific ID, and in quotes, he put the word sub, or that will be a new one.
And that's a good question. Philipp, do you want to take it?
Yes. So with re-verified, you mean deleting iris code and coming back, I assume?
No, reset.
Or reset. Okay. Yeah, similar, right? No, actually not, right? So that's what I call a reset. It's actually like a full reset of anything that, in terms of history, that happened with this user. So a user will, like an app will not be able to say perma block this user across like forever. I will say so there will be some restrictions on how often you can, for example, reset. So think of an exponential delay or something, which are like something which you as a legitimate user won't need. But if you're just trying to do it in order to circumvent whatever, say like the Minecraft block, then yeah, you'll run into issues on that.
All right, very good. And I think that brings us to the end. Yeah, we've got all the audience questions. First of all, thanks everyone that was able to tune into the space today. We appreciate your interest in the project and appreciate you joining. Thanks for all the great questions. I know there's been a lot of great comments in Twitter as well that weren't questions per se. We appreciate those. And thanks so much to Tiago and Philipp for being on the space, not only being on the space, but the amazing work from you and all the teams that went into WorldID 2.0. It's been a super big day around here. Everybody's so pumped up and been celebrating. It's like a second launch, if you will, for the project. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and have a good rest of your day.